There's a moment, right before your life shifts, when everything feels strangely loud. The bills, the doubts, the memories, the contradictions in your reality. They all rise like an old echo trying to remind you of who you used to be. And yet, beneath all that noise, there's a quieter truth asking for your attention. A truth that feels like a pulse inside your chest. A truth that whispers, not shouts. The 3D world is only showing you yesterday, not today, not what you are becoming, not what is already done within you. As you sit with these words, notice your breath, the gentle rise, the soft fall. Even this movement is proof that life is constantly changing without your effort. But when it comes to your desires, I know it feels different. I know you sometimes look at your bank account, your relationships, your opportunities, and your mind starts to panic, as if the outer world is delivering a verdict, as if contradiction means you're failing, as if delay means denial. It's not your fault. You were trained to believe the physical world is the authority. You were taught that if you can't see it, it's not real yet. But Neville always said the opposite. The world you see is nothing more than a newspaper delivering old headlines. It's yesterday's consciousness printed into form, and you've been treating those old headlines as if they're prophecies, as if they are announcing your destiny. They're not. They never were. Right now, without you realizing, an internal conflict is happening quietly beneath your thoughts. One part of you knows the desire is yours. It feels the pull of something new. It senses an identity that is expanding. But another part of you still believes the 3D world more than your inner knowing. You feel something shift inside you, and then you see a contradiction, and suddenly you question everything. You wonder, why does nothing change even when I believe? You wonder whether you're doing something wrong. You wonder whether this works for everyone except you. You're not wrong. You're not failing. You're remembering. Bruce Lipton teaches that your subconscious responds before your conscious mind ever catches up, which means your biology, your reactions, your patterns, even the way you interpret reality, are all shaped by programs that were running long before you chose your new assumption. This is why the outer world seems slow. It's not slow, it's outdated. Your assumption is the only thing happening now. What you feel as truth in silence becomes your living reality in time. The inner shift is the script, already written. 3D is simply catching up to it. Feel the weight of that for a moment. Feel how different life becomes when you stop treating the physical world as the author and start seeing it as the postman. It delivers what was mailed long ago. And right now you're writing a new letter. You're embodying a new identity. You're forming a new state. That is why your reality seems confused. It's transitioning. You're transitioning, and the world hasn't updated yet. But it will. It must. The 3D world has no choice but to echo the state you live in consistently. So today, I want to guide you through 10 revelations, 10 deep understandings that will help you stop reacting to 3D and start living from the end, with clarity, with presence, with sovereignty. Let your breath slow. Let the mind soften. Let the heart settle into a gentler rhythm. Because what comes next isn't information, it's remembrance. There's something quietly disorienting about asking for a new life while still waking up inside the old one. You can feel the inner shift. You can sense the desire settling into your chest, like a truth you can finally hold. You know something has changed, and yet the outer world seems frozen in a version of you that no longer exists. This is where most people start to suffer. They see the delay and interpret it as denial. They assume the universe is rejecting them, or that their inner work didn't work, or that they must be missing some crucial piece of the puzzle. But the only thing that's happening is this. The 3D world is still reflecting your former identity. It's not refusing your new state. It just hasn't caught up to it yet. When Neville said that the 3D world is the past, he wasn't speaking poetically. He meant it literally. Every circumstance around you is a shadow made of old assumptions, and shadows don't update instantly. They linger. They echo. They report yesterday's consciousness, even as you stand in today's awakening. This is why Bruce Lipton's work becomes so important here. He explains that your subconscious operates milliseconds ahead of your conscious awareness, which means your biology, your emotional reflexes, and even your expectations of the world are still replaying old patterns long after you've set a new intention. You've changed the software, but the body is still running the previous program for a while. Cognitive science calls this perceptual lag. The brain doesn't show you reality as it is. It shows you reality as it remembers it. This is why you look at your desire and feel a strange conflict. One part of you knows it's done, but another part of you can only see what the past taught you to expect. You're not broken. You're witnessing the delay between identity and evidence. That delay isn't punishment. It's proof that something is shifting. The old pattern is dissolving, and the residue is what you're seeing. To truly understand this, think back to something in your life that changed internally long before it changed externally. A habit you outgrew, even when people still saw you as the old version. A relationship that ended emotionally before it ended physically. A decision that became real in your heart before a single outer detail moved. The internal shift always precedes the external appearance, but because you're inside the shift, it feels like nothing is happening. It's happening. It's just invisible for a while. That invisibility is not a void. It is alignment. It is evidence that the new state is forming. If the mind struggles to grasp this, use the metaphor of the star. The light you see in the night sky may come from a star that no longer exists. The glow is still traveling, even though the source has already changed form. This is exactly what is happening in your life. Old circumstances are just light from an identity that has already died. They're traveling toward you even as your inner world births something new. You don't need to fear the delay. You only need to recognize what it means. The new reality is already alive within you. The old one is just finishing its last echo. There comes a moment in everyone's spiritual journey when the outer world begins to feel louder than the inner one. You hold a desire in your imagination with sincerity. You feel the wish fulfilled for a few seconds, maybe minutes, and then you open your eyes and see a world that contradicts everything you just affirmed. And because the contradiction feels solid, physical, familiar, your mind gives it authority. This is where the pain begins. Not because 3D is powerful, but because you unknowingly hand your power over to it. The fear of losing the desire arises from this one misunderstanding. Believing that the physical world has the final word, believing the echo instead of the voice. The human mind is wired to search for what it already expects. Psychologists call it confirmation bias, but Neville would simply say that your assumptions sculpt your perception. You don't see what is real, you see what your state filters and highlights. When you assume lack, the world doesn't argue. It merely amplifies all the experiences that confirm lack. When you assume fulfillment, even subtle opportunities appear where you never noticed them before. The 3D world isn't evidence, it's residue. It's the dust left behind from states you no longer belong to. And yet so many people interpret this residue as truth. They look at their bank account, at their relationship status, at their current circumstances, and they forget that these conditions are merely the aftermath of who they once were. When you begin assigning authority back to your inner state, something shifts. It's not dramatic at first and maybe not even noticeable to those around you, but inside a quiet reversal happens. Instead of waiting for the world to validate your desire, you begin validating it from within. Instead of asking the world for permission, you become the one who declares the truth. And this inner declaration is far more consequential than any 3D detail. It reorganizes your posture, your decisions, your attention, your energy. You begin walking differently, breathing differently, interpreting life differently, and life responds. Think of how strange it would be if someone walked into a cave, heard an echo, and assumed the echo was the original sound. That is exactly what happens when you treat 3D as authority. You are responding to reflections, not causes, shadows, not sources. The echo can never tell you anything new. It can only repeat what has already been said. Your inner assumption speaks first. The world repeats it back. This is how manifestation works at its most essential level, not through force, not through techniques, but through recognizing that the outer world is always late, always secondary, always obedient to the state you trust the most. If you can feel this truth even for a moment, something inside you relaxes. The pressure dissolves, the urgency softens. You begin to understand that nothing is slipping away from you. Nothing is being denied. You are simply hearing the last reverberations of the old state before the new one becomes visible. And once you know the difference between the echo and the source, 3D can no longer intimidate you. It loses its spell. It becomes what it has always been, a mirror reflecting your inner whisper, a servant of your identity, a silent testimony of the assumption you've chosen to embody. Pause for a moment. If this awakening is speaking to something inside you, subscribe now so you never forget what your inner world is already creating. Let the next shift meet you fully. There is a subtle ache that appears in the space between who you were and who you are becoming. It's that strange inner tension you feel when you've done the visualizations, repeated the affirmations, sat in the silence of your end state, and yet the world continues to mirror the version of you that no longer fits. This is the identity gap, the space where your consciousness has moved forward, but your circumstances are still echoing the past. And in that gap, doubt often tries to take root. Not because you lack power, but because you haven't yet fully accepted the new identity emotionally, physically, and energetically. You've said yes in your thoughts, but your body still remembers the old story. Your nervous system still carries old expectations. Your emotional reflexes still project old meanings onto neutral events. The desire feels real, but you still feel like someone who is trying to become it. Trying instead of embodying. This is why the Galatea effect becomes such a powerful mirror here. Reality tends to align not with the goals you consciously set, but with the identity you unconsciously believe yourself to be. You can visualize wealth, love, success, or health over and over. But if you still see yourself as someone who is waiting, striving, hoping, or trying, your state announces that identity louder than your desires ever will. You don't manifest what you picture. You manifest what you are. And this is not a reprimand. It's liberation. Because it means you don't need perfect imagination or flawless emotions. You only need inner congruence. You only need to occupy the identity that matches the end you've claimed. This identity is not forced. It doesn't come from pretending. It comes from inhabiting a deeper truth. The truth that the version of you who already has the desire exists now. Not in the future, not after a technique, not after 3D reorganizes. Now. When you align with that version, even in small ways, the shift begins. You start responding to situations differently. You interpret delays differently. You feel your posture change, your tone soften or strengthen. Your decisions arise from a quieter certainty. This is identity rehearsal, not as a performance but as remembrance, the inner confirmation that whispers, "I act as one who already owns this outcome." And in that shift, something dissolves. The old self loses its gravitational pull. To help the mind understand this transition, imagine wearing a brand new outfit over thick, heavy armor. The outfit is fresh, elegant, aligned with who you want to be, but the armor underneath still dictates how you move. It stiffens your walk, limits your gestures, shapes your posture. The outfit is real, but the armor is still running the show. This is what happens when you accept the desire mentally, but never question the identity underneath it. The armor isn't wrong. It was once necessary. It protected you, but it is not needed anymore. And as you release it piece by piece, something remarkable happens. The outfit begins to fit you perfectly. The new identity feels natural. You begin moving like someone who has already arrived. This is the moment the outer world begins to shift. Not when you want it to, not when you force it to, but when there is no longer a gap between what you desire and who you believe yourself to be. Some mornings you wake with a heaviness that doesn't belong to who you are becoming. You've stepped into a new identity. You've chosen the end. You've felt the shift inside your chest, and yet an old emotion surfaces as if trying to reclaim you. It feels confusing because the mind often interprets these returns as a sign of regression, but they're not regressions. They're remnants. Emotional echoes from a state that is no longer active but still dissolving. Neuroscience helps illuminate this gently. When you adopt a new internal state, the brain does not immediately erase the pathways that belong to the old one. Those circuits fade only when they stop being reinforced. And while they fade, they may fire automatically. Not because the old identity is returning, but because it is losing its influence. What you're feeling is not proof that nothing has changed. It's proof that the change is underway. This is why the emotional waves that arise after deep inner work feel so strange. They don't match your new self-image. They don't align with your new assumption. They belong to an older version of you that no longer has authority. When you remember this, something softens. You stop judging the emotion. You stop making it a story. You simply let it pass through without giving it meaning. Think of an earthquake that has already ended. Long after the ground settles, small aftershocks still ripple beneath the surface. They can surprise you, but they don't mean the earthquake has returned. They are the final movements of something already complete. In the same way, The old feelings rising in you now are not calling you back to the past. They're leaving your system. And as they fade, the new identity you've chosen becomes clearer, steadier, and more natural within you. There is a particular moment on the path of transformation that feels almost unfair. You commit to a new identity. You nurture a new inner state. You begin to feel lighter, clearer, more aligned, and suddenly something in your outer world seems to collapse. A bill arrives. A conversation turns tense. An opportunity falls through. It looks as if the universe is punishing you for daring to rise. But this apparent setback is not opposition. It is transition. It is the old structure destabilizing as the new one anchors itself within you. Psychology calls this homeostasis, rebellion, the tendency of the mind and emotions to resist unfamiliar states. Not because the new state is wrong, but because the nervous system is designed to protect what is known. Even limiting patterns feel safer than expansion when they have been practiced for years. So when you step into the new identity, the old self activates its last defenses. And sometimes those defenses appear as external events that shake your confidence. But the shaking is not a sign of failure. It is the tremor that precedes alignment. In truth, the moment things seem to get worse is often the clearest signal that the old pattern cannot sustain itself anymore. The structure that once held you is cracking. The habits that once defined you are loosening. The assumptions that once shaped your life are losing their foundation. The discomfort you feel is not a regression. It is a release. Imagine a pot of water heating on the stove. For a long time, nothing seems to happen. Then, right before it reaches a rolling boil, the water becomes turbulent. It shakes, it rises, it spills over. This turbulence isn't the end. It is the threshold. When your life feels turbulent, you are reaching that same threshold. The energy is reorganizing. The identity is shifting. And the surface is reacting to the change already completed within you. In these moments, trust the inner state more than the outer noise. What feels like breakdown is often the final movement before breakthrough. There is a quiet moment in every transformation where the world seems to question your new identity. You choose a new state. You feel a deeper calm settling into your body. You begin responding to life from a place of inner certainty. And then something happens in 3D that feels like a direct challenge to your progress. A message you didn't want to receive. An unexpected delay. A reminder of an old fear. In that instant, doubt tries to rise, whispering that perhaps nothing has changed at all. But this moment is not a test in the punitive sense. It is a mirror. A reflection of the last pieces of meaning you still attach to your old self. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes a quiet ally. Epictetus taught that it is not the event that disturbs us, but the story we tell about it. The event is neutral. Your interpretation shapes the emotion. And this is precisely what is revealed when 3D appears to contradict your inner work. The world is not testing you. It is showing you what you still interpret through your old state. It is highlighting the assumptions that are ready to be released. When you see this clearly, the contradiction doesn't pull you backward. It simply invites you to anchor your new identity more deeply. Imagine for a moment standing in deeper water for the first time. The waves feel stronger than expected. They rise against your legs, pushing you back toward the shore, not because the ocean wants to reject you, but because you have stepped into a new depth. Your footing is adjusting. Your balance is evolving. The waves do not judge you, they reveal your stability. And as you learn to stand where you once could not, the water stops feeling threatening. It becomes familiar, supportive, even peaceful. This is what happens when 3D presents contrast. The world is not trying to return you to the past. It is showing you the exact point where the old interpretation no longer fits your new self. And as you reinterpret the moment from your fulfilled state, the wave passes. The identity stabilizes. The new depth becomes your new normal. There is a particular tension that arises when you want something deeply and feel it is already yours, yet the outer world hasn't reflected it back. That tension shows up as urgency, as impatience, as the quiet fear that if you don't monitor your reality closely enough, the manifestation might slip away. You begin checking signs, checking progress, checking outcomes, as if life needs supervision. But every time you look for evidence, you send a subtle message to your subconscious that the desire is not here yet, The very act of checking reactivates the state of lack. Modern research on time perception reveals that emotion shapes the way we experience duration. When you are anxious or uncertain, time stretches. Minutes feel longer, days feel heavier, and outcomes feel distant. The desire hasn't slowed, your nervous system has. The more you wait, the slower life feels. The more you check, the longer the journey appears. And yet when you sink into the fulfilled state, even briefly, something remarkable happens. Time softens, the mind quiets, the body relaxes. You stop anticipating and begin inhabiting. This is why stepping away from the obsession with speed creates such profound internal change. When you stop expecting instant confirmation, your energy reorganizes around presence rather than urgency. You begin noticing subtle shifts in your thoughts, your posture, your emotional responses. You start living as though the outcome is inevitable, not fragile. And this state, calm, grounded, conscious, is precisely what accelerates manifestation. Imagine a gardener planting a seed. The impulse to dig it up each morning to check its progress doesn't help the seed grow. It interrupts the process, disturbs the soil, interferes with the natural unfolding. Growth doesn't need monitoring, it needs trust. In the same way, your manifestation doesn't require constant observation. It requires consistency of state. When you stop checking the outer world, the inner world becomes stable. And when the inner world stabilizes, time collapses around your assumption. The desire moves toward you quietly, naturally, inevitably, because it is no longer being delayed by the frequency of impatience. There are seasons in your transformation when everything inside you is shifting, yet nothing outside you seems to reflect it. You feel calmer, clearer, more aligned. Your reactions soften. Your inner dialogue becomes kinder. You sense a subtle expansion that wasn't there before. And still the 3D world appears unchanged, as if it hasn't noticed the work you've done. This is the stage where many people misunderstand their own evolution. They expect the shift to appear dramatically, forgetting that most transformations begin in silence, beneath awareness, in places no one can see. In behavioral psychology, this is understood as the principle that micro shifts precede macro results. The mind, the body, and the emotional system recalibrate long before external conditions reorganize. But because the changes are subtle, more peace, less urgency, new interpretations, and unusual steadiness, you may overlook them. You may dismiss them as insignificant, even though they are the very foundation of manifestation. These inner adjustments represent the moment the old identity weakens and the new identity strengthens. They are the first signs that you have already crossed into a different version of yourself. The difficulty lies in the expectation of obvious proof. The mind looks for big signs, dramatic confirmations, something undeniable, but the universe rarely moves that way. The first evidence of manifestation is often invisible because it is internal. The shift in confidence, the softening of fear, the neutrality you feel towards something that once triggered you. These are not small things. They are the blueprint of the new reality beginning to form. A simple image can help you understand this phase. Imagine watching ice begin to melt. At first, nothing appears different. The shape remains. The structure looks unchanged. But the internal temperature has already shifted. The transformation has begun long before any water becomes visible. This is how your manifestation unfolds. The inner temperature changes before the outer form dissolves. And if you slow down enough to notice these subtle signs, you realize that progress has been happening all along. The new reality is already in motion, even before the world shows you the first visible drop. There is a quiet shift that occurs the moment you stop trying to change the world around you and begin transforming the world within you. Most people exhaust themselves attempting to manipulate circumstances, adjust behaviors, or push outcomes into place. But these efforts only reinforce the belief that reality is in control and you are merely reacting to it. The truth is far more subtle and far more empowering. You don't change 3D by moving its pieces. You change it by occupying a state that makes the old arrangement irrelevant. The outer world reorganizes, not through force, but through identity. This is where the Pygmalion effect becomes a profound mirror. Human beings respond to expectations, both their own and those projected onto them. When you shift your assumption, you alter the field of expectation around you. Your posture changes, your tone changes, your energy changes, and people unconsciously respond. Opportunities emerge, synchronicities appear, pathways open, not because you pushed for them, but because the identity you embody broadcasts a new signal. You are no longer acting like someone who is trying to make something happen. You are living as someone for whom it is natural. This is the quiet twist that most people never realize. You never change circumstances directly. You change the version of yourself that is experiencing them. Once the identity shifts, the outer world cannot stay the same. It must adjust to reflect the new state. And when this becomes clear, the struggle dissolves. You stop asking how the desire will come. You stop trying to micromanage the path. You simply align with the end and allow reality to catch up. Imagine updating the operating system on your phone. You don't need to change each app one by one. You don't need to force anything. Once the system updates, everything behaves differently. The menus shift, the features adjust, the entire experience reorganizes without you lifting a finger. This is exactly how manifestation works at the deepest level. The identity updates first. The world must follow. There is a quiet discipline required when you choose to live from the end. Not the discipline of effort or struggle, but the discipline of remembering who you are becoming even when the world hasn't reflected it yet. You hold the state. You feel the desire is already done, and for a moment it feels effortless. Then 3D contradicts you. Something unexpected happens. A familiar doubt rises. A fragment of the old self whispers that perhaps you imagined too much, believed too fast, hoped too deeply. These moments can feel destabilizing, but they are not signs of failure. They are invitations to anchor your new identity more firmly than before. Neuroscience offers an illuminating parallel here. The brain has a mechanism called reward prediction error, which triggers discomfort when the outer world doesn't immediately match the internal expectation. This is why contradictions feel so intense. The mind is looking for predictable outcomes, but manifestation doesn't operate through prediction. It operates through assumption, and assumption is sustained not by constant perfection, but by quiet commitment. You don't need to feel the fulfilled state every second. You only need to return to it as home again and again, until it becomes the most natural place within you. This is where a simple anchor becomes powerful. Not a technique, but a reminder, a gesture, a breath, a subtle shift in posture that brings you back into the version of yourself who already has the desire. When you touch that inner place, even briefly, you begin living from the end rather than waiting for it. And the more familiar that state becomes, the less influence 3D has over your emotions. You stop reading contradictions as danger. You stop interpreting delays as rejection. You realize that the outer world is simply behind schedule. Picture a pilot navigating through a storm. The winds shake the aircraft, the sky darkens, visibility fades, and yet the pilot remains steady because they trust the instruments more than the storm. They know the turbulence is temporary. They know the path is true. This is what living from the end feels like. You trust the inner instrument, the fulfilled state, more than the temporary contradictions outside the window. And as you do, the storm dissolves. The path clears. The world aligns with the state you refuse to abandon. There is a moment when the truth of your power settles quietly into your being. You no longer look to the outside world for confirmation, because you finally understand that your assumption is the cause, and 3D is only the delayed effect. As this recognition deepens, your thoughts, emotions, and choices begin to align without effort. This is the subconscious acceptance that teachers like Joe Vitale describe, the inner shift that naturally reorganizes your behavior, your attention, and the opportunities that surround you. In this clarity, contradictions lose their authority. They stop appearing as warnings and become what they truly are, reflections from a state you no longer inhabit. The gap between who you were and who you are becoming closes. You start acting from the version of yourself who already possesses the desire. You no longer chase evidence. You move as someone who knows. And from this knowing, the world follows. The desire is done. 3D is simply catching up to the identity you now live in.